Hello, welcome to another episode of Craig's Gun Channel. My name's Craig, and today we're going to talk about the .22. Now, what exactly does the .22 term mean? Well, it can stand for a variety of firearms, both pistols and rifles, but more importantly, it's the ammunition that they take, the .22. Now, what exactly is the .22? Well, it got its name from having a .22 caliber or .22 inch diameter bullet. Now, what about the rest of it? Well, in 1845, the very first metallic cartridge, rimfire cartridge, was created, and it was called the .22 BB cap. This was a very short .22 caliber rimfire case that just used the power of the primer to shoot a .22 caliber lead ball out of the barrel. It was used for indoor shooting ranges or shooting galleries, which were very common at that time period. Well, there was a sister cartridge to it. It was called the .22 CB, which there again, everything was pretty much the same, but used what's called a conical ball, or as a more pointed tip. And there again, it would look a little bit more familiar to us these days as far as what a bullet looks like. But both of them just use the power of the primer and were used for indoor shooting ranges. Well, someone got the idea that this might make a handy cartridge for maybe pest control or small game hunting. So in 1857, they lengthened that case just slightly to be able to add a powder charge, and they increased the bullet to a more traditional bullet geometry, and it was a 27 to 29 grain bullet, and that became what's called the .22 short. Now, there again, it was a lower velocity. It was 700 to 1100 feet per second, but it was enough powder and power to be able to use for small game and pests primarily, and it was very successful. Well, in 1871, someone got the idea, well, why don't we go ahead and lengthen the case some more and allow even more powder to be put in. They retained the 27 to 29 grain bullet, and that developed what's called the .22 long. There again, it was primarily developed to allow a little bit more power, and to do that, you had to make the case a little bit longer for more powder, and this became very successful. In 1880, they lengthened the case again, and they put a longer, heavier bullet in it. It was a 40 grain bullet, and a little bit more powder, and that became what's called the .22 extra long. Well, someone around 1887, someone got the idea, well, why don't we take the .22 long case, use that 40 grain bullet from the .22 extra long, and merge those together. And then that developed what's called the .22 long rifle. So it was the .22 long case, the bullet from the .22 extra long, they put them together, became the .22 long rifle, and that is still essentially the ammunition that we have today. Now the .22 extra long went out of favor. The .22 long rifle, because of developments in powders, was actually a superior round than the .22 extra long, and it just fell out of favor, and in the 1930s, they just quit producing it. So that has the .22 long rifle then from 1887 on to today, and so that leaves us with what we have. Today, it's the most common ammunition made as far as volume, the number of units, and it's available in a variety of different power levels and types, but essentially they're all .22 long rifle. It uses a heeled bullet, and by that I mean the bullet diameter and the case is both .22 inches. So the inside of the base of the bullet comes in slightly so that it can fit inside the case, and that's what's called a heeled bullet. It's a straight walled case, which allows easy extraction and feeding. It comes, like I said, a variety of power levels. It comes in a subsonic round, which many times uses a heavier bullet so that it still has some kinetic energy, but it's lower powder charges, and that way it keeps the speed down below the speed of sound. So it's usually around 1120 or so feet per second. There's standard velocity, which is 1120 and higher to around 1300 feet per second. There's the high velocity, which is 1200 to over 1300 feet per second. And then there's the hypervelocity or ultra velocity, which those go over 1600 feet per second, And generally they use a lighter than standard 40 grain bullet, so a lot of times around a 32 grain bullet, and it's that lighter bullet that allows it to achieve that higher speed. They make shot shells, which is loaded with a number 12 shot. It's frequently called snake shot. I don't know for sure really how effective it may be against snakes. However, the idea being that you have a little bit more of a chance to hit something because it spreads out a little bit. But once you go past about 20 feet with it, it's pretty much a useless cartridge, but it's out there nonetheless. Generally, with the exception of the 22 Magnum, which we'll talk about in a second, all the 22 long rifle, the 22 long, the 22 short, which are all still available today. The 22 short is still available. The 22 long is made intermittently for people who collect some of the older firearms. And the 22 long rifle, generally they're safe to shoot in any firearm, modern firearm, that's chambered for 22 long rifle. However, that doesn't mean you should probably use some of those. The 22 short might not have enough power to cycle the action on a 22 long rifle as far as a semi-automatic. Generally, you need to make sure that you use the ammunition that's recommended for your firearm. Now, I mentioned just a moment ago, there is another version of a 22, and you need to make sure that you know the difference between it. And that's called the 22 Magnum, also known as the Winchester Magnum Rimfire, or WMR. It was introduced in 1959. It uses a straight-walled rimfire case, bullets in the 30 to 50 grain range at speeds ranging from 1,500 feet per second to over 2,200 feet per second. The case is larger than 22, so the bullet itself is 22 caliber, and the bullet fits inside the case like it does with more traditional cartridges. It's not a heeled bullet, and that's very good because that way you cannot chamber a 22 Magnum cartridge in a 22 long rifle firearm. And that's good because that would be an overpower or overpressurized cartridge for that firearm. However, unfortunately, it is possible to put a 22 long rifle in a firearm that's chambered for 22 Magnum. However, it is not safe to do so, and it's actually very dangerous. What could happen, and frequently it will happen, is the case will rupture because it's not large enough to fill the bore of the chamber, and that will cause gases and particles to shoot out, and it could cause severe injury. It could even be lethal depending on how things all went. So there again, make sure you use the ammunition that is specified for your firearm. So those are the main differences that you have in 22. You have the 22 Magnum or 22 WMR, and then you have the 22 long rifle series, and you have 22 shorts, 22 longs, 22 long rifle. So, hope that answers your questions as far as the 22. As always, if you have any questions or feedback, please let me know. I would appreciate if you would subscribe and like the videos if you like the content. And as always, please join me next week and when we'll discuss something new, and hopefully we'll keep learning together. Until then, be safe. Thank you.